It is NFL draft week finally for the Cincinnati Bengals, and we have a special guest on. I think everybody's tired of the mock drafts. Who are the Cincinnati Bengals going to take at 18? Let's talk a very important subject with Raphael over at Punt Analytics. Punting. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
We're ready for the draft.
Doing great. Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, same. Yeah, it's Monday of draft week. I think everybody's ready for it to be Thursday.
We are. And one of the most important things before we talk about kind of this draft class and maybe some of the stars or somebody who could be available for the Cincinnati Bengals, they do have 10 picks. Obviously familiar with Brad Robbins, punter they drafted late last year. And unfortunately, in his first year in the NFL, it didn't go as planned. What can you offer if there's any optimism of Brad Robbins maybe after year one in the NFL in the future, if he is the punter for the Cincinnati Bengals in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, if we want to start there, the transition from college to pro punting is a big one. And I think a lot of people don't understand that because they see, oh, you're just kicking a ball far. If you could kick a ball far and high in college, why can't you do that in the pros? Well, the protection is different. The time from snap to punt is much shorter in the pros. So the technique looks a lot different. And sometimes it just takes punters time to adjust. We've heard this from punters like Jack Fox, who struggled to make a team his first year out of college and now is one of the best in the pros. Yeah, you also get punters who are really good in their first year. That's, we saw that with Ryan Stonehouse 2 years ago. So you get a little bit of both. I think if you want to be positive, you can look at Jordan Stout, who was a fourth-round pick for the Ravens 2 years ago, and he was a below-average punter in his rookie year, and he ended the year this year as just outside the top 10. So that is a conceivable outcome. We didn't have Brad Robbins ranked as high as a prospect as we had Jordan Stout. So I, towards the end of last year, started getting a little bit worried. I think like week 10, week 11, you're still like, okay, there was a weird weather game in there. The sample size is small. There's adjusting, but he just never got better in a way that, was satisfying. I don't have his like week to week stats in front of me right now, but he did end the season as our lowest graded punter, which you never love to see. I think that matches the eye test. You guys absolutely watching every game saw that this is a frustrating fourth down to watch. And in college, he was never like a long ball type of punter. He excelled more at placement and hang time and all of those things that I think fans see a little bit less of. I don't think that he'll necessarily be the most impressive kind of like 70-yard booming punts guy, but there's definitely a world in which he turns into somebody who's consistently forcing like 48, 45-yard fair catches, flipping the field, not shanking the ball. That is an outcome, but I also think that if you're the Bengals, you want to make sure that you have a plan B.
Yeah, I think the main question I had after I watched him was you drafted him and it felt like what was the upside? Because he doesn't have the booming leg and then he didn't even hit the ground running. So kind of a lot of alarm bells go is like, okay, this is supposed to be at least like a decent floor type of guy. He should be able to put it where he wants it. And it didn't seem like he was able to consistently do that. So are there many cases of a guy who doesn't have a lot of in the tool set that just kind of he is able to get so much better? Because you mentioned Jack Fox. I was like, well, Jack Fox has he's got a dynamite leg, and I'm not 100% sure on Jordan Stout. I haven't watched enough, I guess, but I feel like he probably has a better leg. So like kind of weaker leg, but more directional aiming type of punters. What is like the ceiling on that realistically?
Yeah, I mean, the ceiling that I can think of right now is like a punter like Bret Kern, and not maybe like not prime of his career Bret Kern, but you think about like last 2 to 3 years Bret Kern on the Titans before that stint on the Eagles, where he was just like consistently hitting the ball that gets to the sideline, 40 to 50 yards of net, no bad punts. You can count on him on every punt. And the reason that I'm worried about Brad Robbins is because he was billed as this like pro-ready punter. He's got the NFL leg. He's doing things that NFL coaches will like. The results should translate immediately. And maybe the ceiling is lower, but you're getting somebody that can be an NFL punter, and that's just not what we saw this last year.
So if you're the Cincinnati, if you're the Cincinnati Bengals right now, and you just say, you know what, that's a wash, not going to work out, or maybe you do spend another pick. They have 10 picks in this draft, and they decide, hey, in the 6th or 7th round, there's going to be a guy that we feel is going to be a better punter. If you look at this draft class, who would you pick?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it honestly aligns really well for a team like the Bengals because there are so many guys in this draft class. We've seen really strong punter draft classes in the last few years. Last year was not one of them, but the year before, the year that had Jordan Stout and Matt Araiza, was one of them. This one looks a lot like that class, where you're just like 5-6 guys who are really, really good. And the needs, what makes this year different than that year is that way fewer teams need a punter. And so you could see something like the top punter not go until the 6th round because the teams that need punters aren't like super draft heavy in 4th and 5th round picks. And there's just not that many of them. So they can wait, I think. So I see a scenario where teams are drafting these punters early because they're great prospects, but I think it's more likely that we see punters slip. And that could align really well for the Bengals because they can just wait and see, oh, have any punters gone in the 6th round? No, we can wait till the 7th, take one in the 7th on a flyer, and you can still get like a top 5, top 4 guy.
It seems like Tory Taylor from Iowa is kind of consensus number 1 guy. Is there any concern in your mind of like he's a little bit older, I guess, but does that matter for punting? I'm not 100% sure on that.
I think it matters if you're drafting a punter. The age thing with him is exactly, I think that's his biggest flag. It's not huge. He's not like one of these 32-year-old Aussies or like, I think, you could be 32 and he's not. He's only 27, I think. But still, if you're drafting a punter and you're thinking like he'll be in his mid-30s by the time, or his early 30s by the time he signs a second contract, that's not ideal. Though I don't know that teams drafting a punter are necessarily looking for somebody who's going to be on their team for 10 years. Maybe they're just, that rookie contract would be a more than optimal outcome. I think Tory Taylor is terrific. He's our top ranked punter in this draft class. He put up great numbers, and he put up great numbers on an insane amount of punts. So one thing that we often see with college punters is it's just hard to know if these really good seasons are anything because they did it on like 45 punts, and in the NFL, you're going to need the sample size is just much bigger. But Tory Taylor, his last 2 seasons, let me pull this up, were, I think, both over 80, and one, I think, had 98 punts in it this most recent season. So when I see something like, 93 punts and graded out as, a top, definitely above our draftable threshold on 98 punts, that tells me that those results probably translate, that there's something that he's doing consistently, every down, every punting down to get those results. He also had a low amount of bad punts, which is something that we like to see. Sometimes you get these punters that have really great numbers, but they're propped up by, 2 or 3 70-yard punts that bounced a whole bunch of yards. And then you look and you scroll down to their worst punts, and it's like, oh, there's like 7 or 8 punts that traveled under 30 yards. I don't love seeing that. Tory Taylor is not one of those guys. So that's something that makes me confident in him. If you want, we can talk about the next guys, because I'm not sure that Cincinnati is going to want to be the first team to draft a punter, and that looks like it's going to be Tory Taylor. Yeah,
if there's just another set of anybody who you would feel, hey, maybe you you don't waste a draft pick on it. I hate saying waste because punters are people too. But you decide to, oh, you know what? He's probably going to be available as soon as the draft is over. Let me give him a phone call. He'll be undrafted. You know, who are those guys who you feel there's high potential with?
Yeah. So I'll get there in a second. I just want to outline the next tier of punters, which I think are all pretty equivalent. So that's Austin McNamara from Texas Tech. He had a great season a few years ago, and then a down season in 2022, and then back up to a really good season in 2023. And he's only 23, which is a great age for a punter prospect. I know that's, seems old for any draft prospects, but these punters are so old. Being 23 is a big plus for him. Then we have Matthew Hayball, who I really like. I think you can tell the story of his college career really well. He was at FAU his first 3 years, then transferred to Vandy. His numbers went down his first year in the SEC and then bounced way up. And you can see like, oh, this is somebody who's adjusted to better competition, who's, been able to like put in the work to adjust. And his 2023, if you discount the number of punts, was the best by any punter. So Matt Hayball is a name to remember. He could be, a 7th round flyer type of guy. Ryan Rico rounds out that tier of like the top draftable punters. He's the punter out of BYU. He's a little bit older. And then in this like back end of the draft, like really 7th round flyers or free agents, the guys we like are Ryan Sanborn out of Texas, who is actually we'll have a punter only mock draft coming up. And he's who I have mocked to the Bengals. So if we hit on that, that'll be pretty cool. And Porter Wilson out of Duke. And both of these guys are 23. It's a great age, as I just said. And they have numbers, especially Ryan Sanborn, his most recent season, this 2023 season, posted great numbers, both in terms of like booming punts and in terms of precision near the goal line.
Yeah. I'm going to assume the answer is yes, but do all these guys have a higher grade for you coming out than Brad Robbins did?
All of them except for Porter Wilson.
Okay.
Yeah. And I have to go back exactly to remember exactly what our grade on Brad Robbins was. And we were lower on him than some of the other guys who do like punt analysis. And I really trust a lot of these guys too, that, that we follow, that we like their analysis of. And they've been right on some guys that we've been wrong about. But yeah, Brad Robbins, I just didn't see it in the numbers. So
what do you say to people? What do you say to people who you just drafted one last year? You can't do it again this year, even though you have the 10 picks. It's not a good idea. I mean, because I feel like a punter is a huge deal on this team. You need a good punter. It was a fail last year with Brad Robbins. The year before, there was the reason they lost an AFC championship. Well, one of the reasons why they lost an AFC championship game. I mean, he drilled it right to the player. What do you say to those people that, it's still important to draft a punter on special teams and have that on your team?
I mean, I would say it's a sunk cost, right? That the pick that they spent, they already spent it. They're not going to get that back. You want a good punter. If they really believe that Brad Robbins can develop, then power to them. I would trust them more than I would, trust myself. They know what they have with this guy in the building. But if you have, and they have 2 6th round and 2 7th round picks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have that amount of capital at the end of the draft, I feel like you can get better return if you spend one of those picks and you get a starting punter out of it. That seems to be better value than a linebacker that won't make the team, for example, or, a 5th string running back, which is what you often see from these picks. I mean, of course, you could get a quarterback who turns out, I mean, the Bengals won't do that, but there's more valuable things than a punter. But I think that like the floor for a starting punter and how valuable that can be is higher than a lot of what you get with the 7th round flyer.
Okay, real quick, weird to ask at the end. How do you get it? How'd you get into all this punting analytics?
Yeah, so our Twitter is run by a group of 4 friends from college, and we were in college, and we sort of were like, nobody's doing this. Nobody's talking about punters, and nobody's talking about advanced stats with punters. And we have some ideas. Why don't we just start a Twitter and get into it. And the analytics community has been super welcoming, and we've learned a lot from, various people on Twitter. And I didn't really code before that, but sort of taught myself to do it to be able to do analysis of punters. So my coding knowledge is very limited, but one of my friends does more of that kind of in his own life professionally. So he's able to organize that. And people responded really well to it, especially punters. We got great response early on from NFL punters, from guys like Thomas Morstead, guys like Bret Kern, Jake Bailey, Jack Fox. All of those guys were just really into it. I think punters like to be more represented, and they like all of this data that other positions kind of have more access to. And so we've just kind of kept doing it, and we like being that account that tweets out how your punters are doing every week. And fans like to know as well.
Where can fans find that? Because I'm hoping we're tracking that next season when the Bengals add another punter and he's successful.
For sure, you should follow us on Twitter at the Punt Runs.
Awesome.
Or just look up Puntalytics on Twitter, and that's us.
This is awesome, and it's so refreshing to talk about something other than who the Bengals are going to pick at 18. Really enjoyed the conversation. Fans need to go check it out. I'm sure we're going to be referencing that going into the draft this week. It's finally here, and going into the 2024 season. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Thanks so much for having me, and enjoy your draft nights.
Thank you. We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. The NFL draft is here, just a few days away. We'll have a mailbag later in the week and kind of do who we think the Cincinnati Bengals are going to pick, who maybe we want them to pick at 18 in other rounds with those 10 picks in the NFL draft. But we're going to start with offensive linemen. We've talked about offensive linemen plenty. For me and the Cincinnati Bengals, I am totally fine if they go trenches. It could be defensive tackle, could be offensive lineman, but that's where I'm really leaning as we get closer. I know we've talked about it plenty on this podcast. When it comes to a Bengals pick, it really feels like a J.C. Latham, Alabama, SEC type of guy. Amarius Mims is getting mocked to them a lot, from even just fan mocks to expert mocks. Maybe they take a flyer out and he's there at 18. But if you are the Cincinnati Bengals right now and you're looking at these offensive linemen at 18 and just in the first round overall, give me some guys that are standing out. And when you went back to watch some more of the tape, who you feel comfortable with right now?
I felt comfortable with the same guys. I feel like I felt comfortable with the whole time, where I think that we could do like a very quick. So what are the pros and cons of taking this guy? Like Fashanu, I think he might be the best of the group. Sometimes I wonder what the exact ceiling is, because there's not a lot of pop in the run game. He can get to the right spot, but he's not going to move guys like J.C. Latham. He's a good athlete, but not a great athlete. So he doesn't have the upside of Amarius Mims in my mind. He's got some crazy recovery ability, which is one of the most important things you can do as an offensive lineman. I think that his pass protection should translate, but that would be my question. And then the other question for the Bengals is clearly, can he move to right tackle? Because we have a left tackle for at least the next couple of years. Now, maybe you think he'll be right tackle, then left tackle, or maybe you think he can move like Penei Sewell. The thing is, those guys, Penei Sewell, elite of the elite athletes. Same with Tristan Wirfs. So he's not exactly there. So that's why I think you bring him in and discuss that. And I don't think any of it matters, because I think he'll go like 12th. Next on my list, and this is just me, like I'm assuming Joe Alt's gone. I would go with Amarius Mims. And I feel like the more I've thought about it is just, he had a tightrope surgery, and I get that that's a concern because he only started 8 games. But there is a difference between being raw and being inexperienced. And right now, to me, he is inexperienced, and that is better. I think he moves really well. I think he moves better going backwards in pass protection than he does going forward in the run game right now. And in my brain, I think it's easier to get a guy to move forward than it is backwards. So if he's doing the hard thing, let's get him to do the easy thing. Now, there's still areas to improve in pass protection, but that would be the selling point to me. He played right tackle, so you don't need to worry about moving him to left tackle. Like, some teams are going to have the conversation about, like, can he play left tackle? The Bengals don't need to worry about that. This will be drafting a right tackle. I don't think there is positional versatility with him, excluding possibly moving to left tackle. But that won't be for the Bengals. Like, he's not going to go inside and play guard. Even with the low experience, he just he looks and feels like a tackle. Next on my list would be J.C. Latham, who I think has a good floor. And I think there is a ceiling there, but he's not the best athlete. I think the issue there that you're looking at is he doesn't move that well in space. He's not open field agile. It's just, I think the Bengals run game can cover that up some, but we keep talking about all these athletic offensive linemen we want to add, and he's not one of them. So if they add him, and I think they will like him a lot because he's powerful, he's big, he's got good, strong hands, he's used to playing in pass protection. Don't think he was challenged too much in the areas I have a lot of concerns, but he looked good this season. I think they'll like him because he fits what they've drafted over the past. You know, I think of like Andre Smith. I think of Willie Anderson was ginormous. I think of Levi Jones was a giant dude. All these guys, Duke Tobin was here for, I don't think he's here for Willie, but you know, I'm sure that that is something they look for is like, we want a Willie Anderson. Sure. And it doesn't fit Jonah, but then do they want another Jonah? That'd be a question for me because the guys they keep bringing in are big, strong, size, don't care about the athleticism. So that would be my J.C. Latham quick one. He played right tackle too, so you don't need to worry about a transition. I think he could play guard if need be.
Okay.
My question with that is I don't think he had the next guy on my list, Troy Fautanu level of processing, where I felt like Fautanu, and he's 24, so like this makes sense, but he was the smartest offensive lineman I watched, where he knew exactly what the defense was trying to do on like every play. I think he thrived in chaos, which is weird. Most of these guys don't. Like his feet and hands are out of whack, and he's just able to fix them. I think it also got him into trouble sometimes because he wasn't able to anchor. I don't think he's weak. Like I think that came up sometimes as a thing. With some people comparing him to Jonah. It's like when I watch him in the run game, he is displacing people. He is shoving guys into the ground. He is finishing. He is driving people. I don't see Jonah. I could see a guy that's better at guard, and I think he's a better guard than he is at tackle, and that could be a question for the Bengals, but he played a little left guard. He's never played right tackle. If they take him, to me, it would be to be an all-pro left guard, which I see. I think I could see that. I know he's 24. Like, that's the other big issue. So, like, how much better can he get? But I think there's a good ceiling there because of how fluid he is. Lastly, I'll just hit the last one. Is Taliesin Fuaga. I think he is a lot of people's favorite, and I still like him a lot. Like, this is a first-round grade I'm giving him. Mm-hmm. Right tackle. I just have these minor concerns that keep creeping up. It's like, I don't love him. Like, he gives up a short corner. And Oregon State did the weirdest thing where their quarterback was throwing the ball from 5 yards deep. Joe Burrow, I mean, look, Ted Karras and the interior of this offensive line are usually like 5 yards deep. So Burrow will not be standing there. If not, they're like 4 yards deep, 3 yards. Like he's at 9 yards, 8 yards at least. So when he loses around the corner to like Latte Latu, and you think like, oh, he rode him around the back of the pocket. It's like, did he? Because Latu's at 8 yards. It's just the quarterback is so high up there that it didn't matter. So I question that a little bit. Like he gives up the corner sometimes. He has these short arms, and it shows up on film. I think he is a super explosive athlete. I do wonder a little bit about how comfortable he is pass setting, because like those were all my questions were in pass sets really. And for the Bengals, I don't love it. I think somebody out there, I can't remember who it was, compared him to Mike Iupati, who was a guard and a heck of a guard, run first, wide zone type guard, though he could play any scheme really. But to me, Fuaga is, if I had a Dolphins or a 49ers, if I was one of those teams, I would adore the idea of getting Fuaga, because I'm not going to throw the ball in true drop back situations 40 times in a game. I'm going to be running the heck out of the ball. I'm going to be using his athleticism, his explosion off of the ball, and I'm going to be using him as a weapon. And then we can kind of hide that little bit of pass protection issues. So I know he didn't give up any sacks. I'll get hit with that or whatever else that people are going to say, but it's about the process to me. And the process for him didn't seem as translatable as the other guys in pass protection. So those were the quick reports of all of those guys. So make your own opinion, but that was my order and report.
I'm going to go over a couple. We don't have to go through every single one of them, who you just mentioned, which I feel like is a perfect breakdown. And Spencer, when you clip this, I think that's the perfect clip, because Mike really
might be too long.
No. It's absolutely perfect, because obviously in our next segment, I do want to talk a little bit about other prospects and other position groups. But when you think about this offensive line, because it has been a topic of conversation for me, I feel like I'm leaning towards, as we get closer, it is the Amarius Mims. I agree. I feel like we heard all season long, oh, it's the like injury concern. Well, it's really not a lengthy history of injuries. And yeah, the inexperience overall is a really good comparison. And in an ideal world for Amarius, he doesn't play his rookie year. I know a lot of people would say, "Oh no, we need this rookie to be out there getting snaps right away." No, I don't feel that. I hope that Trent Brown is healthy and productive enough at right tackle that Amarius Mims gets to watch and get that experience. And then if Trent Brown does get injured, look, it could be week 13 of the season. Amarius Mims has been able to be around these offensive line groups. You get a left tackle in Orlando Brown Jr. You have experience with Ted Karras at center. And then obviously Alex Kappa is a vet and to be determined on who your left guard is. But right now it's Cordell Volson. So I think that would be absolutely huge for him in his rookie year. That's in a perfect world. We don't live in perfect worlds. So he could, end up starting sooner than later. But I feel like that would be absolutely huge for him. I'm with you on Troy. And for me personally, I felt this since day one. I know a lot of people want to say, oh, no, you need that right tackle. You need that right tackle. Again, in a perfect world, Trent Brown gets to play the whole season, even though he does have that injury history and he doesn't last the whole entire season. You get Troy as a guard or at least competition, interior for your offensive line, having the guard of the future. I still think about the 2021 second round offensive line draft class, and it gives me nightmares because I think about what could have been if they didn't draft Jackson Carman, but we don't live in that world anymore. And this is a time for the Cincinnati Bengals to finally get it right. Don't overthink it. And if they get a guy like JC Latham, you mentioned he's not like a Jonah Williams guy. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
I said about Troy, but it's definitely true about Latham. Latham is
okay.
He's like the opposite of Jonah.
Tell me some of the opposites and like a positive outlook for him.
Okay, size. That's the big one. Long arms. Very big. You're never going to go into a season and go, I wish Amarius Mims could put on 10 pounds of good weight. Like, no, he's 360 pounds. Jonah was just around 300. Jonah, I thought, was a good technician and mover, and I felt like he always hit his spots. And I do think Latham hits his spots, but I don't think you would look at him and go like, this is the clinic tape of offensive line play. Like this is what we would be sending. Like I do think that sometimes with Jonah, where he sets his feet, you could send that and be like, this is how we want offensive linemen to set. It's not like he had an issue getting to his spot. It's everything after. And JC Latham is kind of, I've heard the phrase that JC Latham is built to hit fastballs, and Jonah Williams was not. And what I mean by that is when the defense, the pass rusher, whoever, their number one move is usually some type of power move. Because if they can get that on you, they're going to run it all day. And if you can't anchor in against that, then you're going to have a lot of issues. It's not like everybody seems to be able to have that. It just takes size, speed, and strength, and a little bit of hand placement, whatever. JC Latham could take that. He's great. He's 360 pounds. He'll anchor in against all of that. The questions become against the inside, outside, and does he have the speed to get outside and, get to these guys that are going to be able to run extremely fast from wide nine alignments, which he didn't face in college. I think that would be the big question I have with him. But to me, the floor is there. I think he'll give you at least solid pass protection because of his hands, because of his size. And, DeJuan Jones is a worse mover than him, and he seemed to do all right for the Browns last year. And then the run game, it's completely different. Like where Jonah gets to the right spots and hopefully just holds his point of attack. I think of all the time, I always think of this clinic with Howard Mudd where he said like 90% of the league is fighting for advantageous stalemates, just getting in good position. JC Latham, one of the 10% that doesn't have to do that because he can actually move a guy at wherever he wants when he gets into them. So if you can hone him in a little bit and get him to become a good technician and stay balanced in the run game, he will move guys. And that is something that not everybody can do, especially you look at these guys in college that can't do it. He's a guy that blasted people in college, and I think it will translate to the NFL.
Any additional thoughts on offensive linemen just in the first round? We'll get to other prospects in our next segment.
Because they're rising, I am a little terrified of the idea that they go Tyler Guyton or Patrick Paul. And I'd rather go Guyton than Paul because I think Guyton's a little bit more of an athlete. I think Paul was just he's so raw. They're both very raw, especially in pass protection. It doesn't make sense in my head to go with these guys if somebody else is on the board, but there's a chance that Amarius Mims failed a medical. And Troy Fautanu, I heard late last, like maybe last night, early today on Twitter, I saw some teams haven't flagged for a knee injury. So do they pass on any of these guys for a more healthy version of Patrick Paul or Tyler Guyton? It's possible, and it scares me until Thursday at like 8, 9, 10 p.m. when the Bengals are drafting and we see a different name. And I don't see them doing this, but yeah, those two, and we can talk more about them after the break, but that is what scares me, is that they go that direction.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I looked back on a tweet that I put out on 4/23/2020. That was when they drafted Joe Burrow. And obviously the whole fan base knew they were going to go Joe Burrow. But I remember putting it out that morning and I just said, how are you guys feeling? What's the vibes? And there were so many people that they were excited, but they said, I don't believe it until they call his name. You know, until they say it's official, then I won't believe it or I won't be happy about the pick. And I think fans still, even though 18 versus the first pick and a Joe Burrow versus maybe an offensive line prospect are two totally different things. But I think a lot of fans kind of feel the same way when it comes to terrifying picks of who could be there at 18. And that's the pick they go with. But you know, right now, again, as we get closer, it feels trenches either both. It could be defensive tackle or offensive line. I know cornerback is a possibility, and maybe their guy falls, and they do want cornerback help. But man, I still believe in their secondary room, even though it's really young. Not to get too far into that pick, and we will on Wednesday give who we think the Bengals are going to pick and who we want the Bengals to pick at 18, so we can kind of get into our guesses later this week when we do a mailbag too. But offensive lineman, I feel like that was a really good breakdown of the possible guys who are there at 18. There are other visits that the Bengals are currently doing, some top 30 visits, and we'll get into some other prospects next. And it's always game day in Cincinnati. We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. All right, so we're moving around to say they go DT, go defensive tackle. Maybe it's Byron Murphy, who I feel like is going to be off the board in the top 10 now. He's giving me Brock Bowers vibes, not even being available. But hey, this is what happens leading up to the draft. You're going to hear all these conversations. I mean, goodness, JJ McCarthy is getting predicted to be the number 2 pick, which is absolutely crazy to me. But hey, crazier things have happened in a quarterback draft class in the first with the first 5 picks. But for the Cincinnati Bengals, if more quarterbacks go, that's always a good thing. Say they go defensive tackle, it's Byron Murphy, who in a positive update, we got one on Thursday and Friday. Johnny Newton had a top 30 visit with the Cincinnati Bengals.
Late top 30. Sometimes those are a little bit more important. I don't know. Could this have been a smoke screen all along?
But it was really, it's crazy. A lot of theirs, and again, the Bengals don't tweet out every time we have a top 30 visit. We want to let you know this is all insiders who put this information out. I want to say Joe Goodberry, and then also, friend of the show, Joe Goodberry, Jake Lisco, and James Rapine. I know that they're a little insider text sent text messages to subscribers too, so we were able to see that. So those guys were on top of it. Credit to them, and I think that's extremely important. I know he was tweeting out a couple things. I don't look too much into Twitter and what players are tweeting because you don't know. You don't know if Johnny Newton's going to be there. I know that I would be pumped to get a defensive tackle, and that would be awesome. But any thoughts on Newton possibly being there or Murphy at 18?
I like both. Love Newton. Like Murphy, warmed up to him more and more as the process went on, where I went and watched him against different teams, where it just happened. Like when I went to go watch Cooper Beebe, I was like, oh, well, I've got the Texas game, so let's turn it on, even though I haven't watched this before. And like, I see how it works. I think he has a high floor. I think he is a good player. I just feel like something. It's kind of my similar feelings with Fuaga, where I can't get some of these plays out of my head, where he's driven on double teams and moved around, and then I read things where like he's great against double teams. It's like sometimes, yeah, when he can get underneath them and split them, and it looks super cool. But then they're like, I don't know, 40% of the time, he's driven 5 yards on that double team, 6 yards. You can't have that. Even if he splits it eventually, he got ran into the linebacker, and that's not a way to take on a double team. He should take on less double teams to the NFL level because he won't be playing nose tackle as much because Texas kept him there. But it's just stuck in my head. But then you watch him more and more, it's like consistently a good player and being able to win despite not being the best technician. I think some of that matters. He's got the right body type. When you look at him just in terms of his size and how he's built, it looks like he can take on more weight and more good weight and become an even bigger and stronger player as he develops. He's a little bit younger of a prospect. I think Newton right now is just, I see the goods in pass protection more. I see him more as a guy that comes in year one and can provide a good pass rushing ability to this unit, where I feel like Murphy won more on his athleticism and his general like explosion off of the ball and being able to beat some guards and centers and whoever else just by being quicker, faster, better than them. And I don't think that translates as well right away. It could lead to a high ceiling, but you need to be able to beat the hands of these guys because every offensive line player in the NFL is essentially like a college all-star. They all know how to use their hands, and they're more refined now than they were then. So you're not just going to beat them. They're mostly good athletes. If they're not good athletes, they've been able to make it work because you are not the first great athlete that they've ever gone against. So that's my one concern is just like, will he ever develop into a high-end pass rusher? I don't know because he doesn't have the move set right now. But I think if he does, he has a really high ceiling as a pass rusher. Just right now where I am, I think Johnny Newton is more pro-ready in terms of rushing the passer. And I feel like they're similar when it comes to defending the run. I feel like, to me, the Murphy hype on that is a little bit of gas, whereas I think the Newton downplaying is a little bit wrong too, because I feel like when he gets soloed up, he's able to defeat those blocks, and he split a double team with Olu Fashanu on it, and I don't see that as often when it comes to people talking about it. So those are quick thoughts on those two. I think both are good situations. I would give like for grades, like Newton's probably an A and Murphy's probably a B plus somewhere in there. The data on Murphy's also really good. So if you care about that and how safe that makes him as a prospect, I think that matters a little bit too.
Yeah, our guys over at Gridiron grading very high on Byron Murphy in the comparison with Chris Jones, and they are some of the top guys. I mean, their work, what they do, Bengals fans should definitely follow them. NFL fans should follow them. Just fantastic work over there over on Twitter. So let me just ask you this before we get into some other quick prospects, possibilities, some guys you want to bring up. But if you do go Newton or you do go Murphy the second, what does their rookie year look like?
Yeah, I think what you're hoping for is he gets the full allotment of Zach Carter snaps. And what the thing is, in my mind, Rankins probably plays more snaps than Reeder because Reeder would come off the field and, he's a big guy. So you're going to want to take him off the field every once in a while just to give him some breaks. And Rank is a little bit smaller than that. So you can keep him on the field a little bit extra. So does that have a minimal effect, 50, 100 snaps on the next up? So maybe it's a little bit less than Zach Carter got, even if it's like, he's coming off the field. It's just, you're just replacing them when they come off the field and come on the field and base downs. So whatever Zach Carter played, I think he played like 500 snaps. That's what I would expect for one of these guys. And then Zach Carter, I guess, would bump down to the next, or maybe Josh Tupou sticks around and he takes that role again. I do wonder about like who is playing nose on this team sometimes. Is that the plan? Like Murphy played nose, so we'll just throw him out there and let him play some nose, and he'll split some double teams, get crushed by some double teams, and he'll figure it out as it goes. I don't know. Maybe they just will move around a lot and become a more attacking and slanting type front. I don't know. It's really interesting, and it's a little scary because the way Lou has always wanted to play does not vibe with their current unit. And really, I just mean by that they don't have a guy like DJ Reeder. And at least when Josh Tupou was a little younger, he could take on a little bit when Reeder would miss, and it still wouldn't be DJ Reeder, but it would be like, okay, yeah. And maybe the plan, we don't know, is to get a nose tackle at some point in this draft. Like, these guys aren't real nose tackles to me. So at least not one I would want there playing 200 snaps. So maybe they do draft McKinley Jackson, or my guy, Devondre Sweat. Maybe they take the chance on him in round 4. I don't know. So those are all those stats.
All right, this is going to be quick. Give me some quick hits, prospects that could be the first round, could be the second round, could be a sleeper, position groups. Let's go.
Okay. Well, I spent a lot of time watching wide receivers. I watched a ton of wide receivers, and I think some people saw there was like over 3,000 people that watched it or something. I like Adonai Mitchell, and if they go wide receiver round 1, I like him more than Brian Thomas Jr., and I'm okay standing alone on that. I think he has a higher floor. I think Brian Thomas Jr. It's really weird to see a guy not play in like an Art Briles system, the old Baylor, current Tennessee, where they run like 3 routes and that's all that matters. He didn't play in that system, but that's all he ran. And it was really bizarre. And I know that Matt Harmon, everybody's a friend of the show, I think charted him at like 70% of his routes, or maybe it was Brett Coleman that said this, 70% of his routes were a go route, a hitch route, or a slant route. And that's the Art Briles system, and we've seen what that's happened. Corey Coleman was one of those, and last year you had that fast guy. I can't remember his name right now. Jalen Hyatt. He was another one of those. It's like these guys don't hit right away, and Corey Coleman never hit. So I think that they won't go wide receiver round one, but if I went one and the top three weren't there, then I would go Adonai Mitchell. I don't care about he's got some diabetic issue and some immaturity issues, and I would just hope that the locker room's able to keep him there. Maybe you can kind of assign somebody to him to kind of walk him around, like teach him the ropes, whatever else. They've got a great wide receiver room. I think my favorite of the guys who could be there in round two, and I don't expect him to be there, would be Lad McConkey. I just think he's a great mover. I don't know if he's 100% a guy that can play on the outside and everything else, but I do think he's a really good mover. Jalen Polk's getting some weird hype to go round one. I think they'll like him a bit. I wonder about his ceiling. I think Keon Coleman and Xavier Worthy, I gave them like similar grades in terms of these guys are flawed but interesting, and I think they're real wide receivers. Do you think that Keon Coleman has at least okay speed to be able to play outside? Maybe. And do you think Xavier Worthy can do anything besides run deep and be fast? I think so. So that's why I give him a little bit higher grade. And then just a couple of the guys like Troy Franklin, he gets a lot of hype. I'm prepared to be very wrong, but I'm concerned. And I gave him a good third round grade. Don't hate him. I hate a lot. I generally have found, because the consensus grade's right next to where I put in for the draft sheet, Joe Goodberry's draft sheet. You can check it out. I'm a hater of this draft. I'm like always lower than consensus. Like there's guys like Troy Fautanu, I'm lower than consensus. And I was like, I like Troy. What's happening? Yeah. And so I looked at Franklin. I'm like, yep, I'm 2 points under consensus. And Xavier Worthy, 2 points under consensus. And Keon Coleman, a point under consensus. So it's like everybody, if I reach consensus with a player, I guess that means I like them. So yeah, I think that all those guys make sense to me. I think that if you end up in the round 3 range is where and they had a 30 visit and a pro day visit with Jalen McMillan, and he was a tough evaluation for him. I give him a third round grade, but I didn't get to see enough. And that now there's a lot of mouths to feed because Jalen Polk stepped up and because they have Roma Dunze and they're throwing the ball over the yard. But I felt like there was something to him. Like I wanted to give him a higher grade, but I think he's slot only, which I don't know if the Bengals would care about. Maybe they're just thinking about placing Tyler Boyd and they aren't sold on Charlie Jones. So you're going to use a day 2 pick on that. Maybe it's Jalen McMillan. I think the one guy I did not love, and they did have a combine pro day combo with him, was Brendan Rice. Jerry Rice's kid. I don't see it. I don't know. I personally just don't see it. I don't know. He has the funniest running style to me, where his arms are just so lively going up and down. So that was a quick wide receiver update I watched basically everybody. I didn't get the Malachi Corley, and I know Javon Baker's everybody's sleeper. So there's your sleeper, Javon Baker. Why not?
Okay, real quick, and then we're going to wrap it up. Luke McCaffrey. I feel like he was one that people were talking about late in the draft. You haven't seen him? And no. I could see them kind of double dipping at wide receiver again, going maybe the 2nd or 3rd round and doing another one in the 5th or 6th round because they love wide receivers. And even Zach Taylor was asked about wide receivers today, and he's like, look, we like throwing the ball. It's always a good thing to have another guy out there to throw the ball to. So for me personally, it's going to be day 2. I could see them getting their wide receiver, being the Tyler Boyd replacement, just having more depth. It's not going to be, the future T. Higgins replacement, but it's still another weapon for Joe Burrow in 2024 with a still productive wide receiver room. We have to see more out of Charlie Jones. And then Yoshi in year 2. I wish that they would have received more reps kind of going down the stretch with Jake Browning. But again, it is what it is. But no, great stuff. Bengals fans need to go check out all your work, all Bengals, and over on your Twitter account, you have a lot of good breakdowns from some of these prospects that maybe they're players that people aren't keeping an eye on, and they should, and they could be fits for the Cincinnati Bengals with 10 picks. We'll get into our prediction, who we think they're going to take, who we want them to take, do a double mailbag, and be a day away from the NFL draft. We'll recap the pick on Thursday night. Hopefully the Cincinnati Bengals get your favorite player. That's all I got to say. I'm sure we'll all agree with their 18th pick, and we'll be super happy and be like, you know what? This is a great pick. I have no complaints. Everyone's happy. No, that's probably not that's not what's gonna happen.
That's not even the Bowers scenario. There's Bowers haters out there.
There are. And if Brock Bowers is there, my dream will come alive if he's sitting there at 17. And you know what'll happen? The Jags will take him.
Oh, they just drafted a tight end. They paid Evan Engram. Why not? Let's just get another.
Who knows? But yeah, no, fantastic stuff. I'm so happy draft week is here. I have fatigue. I said it on social media. It feels like the NFL mock draft started the middle of November, so it's been a really long time, and I'm really looking forward to draft weekend for the Cincinnati Bengals. The first round looks fun, and hopefully they add to the trenches, or maybe they'll add to their secondary or their wide receiver room. We'll see what happens. As always, thank you for listening to It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati.